Frank, let's hear you comment a little further on some of your other achievements with the Wildlife Resources Commission after you moved up from the game division, particularly environmental work.
Well, in '74, I was chief of game division from '52 to '74. In '74, after passage of the Environmental Policy Act and the Endangered Species Act, December 27, 1973, Endangered Species Act. I don't know why the figure sticks in my mind. Anyway, I was transferred by the commission to head up what we called interagency wildlife coordination. And this had to do, really, what it amounted to was telling other agencies how to run their business without messing up the wildlife program.
Right.
Okay. And it was based really on the Wildlife Coordination Act, which was passed in 1957, and of course finally, and then also the Environmental Policy Act. But the Wildlife Coordination Act required federal agencies or any program that had to be funded or permitted by the federal government was supposed to give wildlife equal importance as a major element of the program. And it was, I think, pretty much ignored until after the Environmental Policy Act was passed, when they had to develop environmental policy statements, assessments. This came into something that we had to review environmental policy statements to see to it that the wildlife elements were properly addressed and recognized and accommodated. One of the first ones that we ran into a problem with was cashiers. They wanted to reinstall hydropower at the dam at the lake there into the CoowcH River, I think is what runs there. And what they wanted to do was to enlarge the flume from 25 inches to 36 inches. And I did some calculating on that thing, and it finally occurred to me that, hey, look, if they do that, and they just run this at night, or at peak power, whenever they run it, they're going to run the lake down so much because of the volume that they take out that the river's going to be running dry. And while the average flow might be adequate to take care of the trout don't live on averages. They've got to have constant water. And so I wrote to the folks up there that pointed this out to them and told them we couldn't improve that enlargement of that flume to beyond 25 inches. Well, that was not a very popular thing to do, but anyway, we had to do it. Another thing that came up that in Chapel Hill, they need to have a larger water supply, and it was on Cane Creek. But there again, they had to do something to provide habitat, to replace the habitat that would be lost by the inundation. And we got approval. That was a fairly easy one. We got agreement from those folks to buy land at another location to set it up for wildlife management purposes.
Mitigation.
Mitigation, yeah, mitigation. One of the things that we ran into, one of the big things really, was channelization, stream channelization. I'll never forget one day in Washington at one of the wildlife meetings. I was talking with some of the Soil Conservation Service people, and they told me that the new frontier for agricultural expansion was in the southeast where all the wetlands are. And this is where they're going to have a tremendous expansion in the agricultural program of the country. And they had PL 5, Public Law 556 or 555 or whatever the number was passed, which provided provided for channelizing streams to get the water off the land more rapidly so that they could clear it for agricultural purposes. I had a young biologist working for me by the name of Frank Barick, who was in the eastern part of the state. And he pointed out to me that this was really having a devastating impact, not just on the streams, but also on the land itself, and that we were going to be losing a lot of very valuable wildlife habitat. And we started talking with the Soil Conservation Service about this, but no. I remember one day I spent a whole day riding with Schlaut, who was at that time chief engineer for the Soil Conservation Service, trying to figure out how we could do this thing without ruining all the wetland and ruining all the streams. Because what they were doing, they were taking a small meandering stream in a wetland and converting it into a wide, 200-foot wide cleared area, sunlighting that wetland, and then building a huge ditch to carry that, a straight line ditch to carry that to the stream, completely ignoring the fact that a stream, the structure of a stream is very, very important. The riffles provide air, oxygen to the water. The underbank cuts provide hiding place for fish. All the woody material in the stream provides food, substrate for food organisms for fish and other organisms. And this was really a very important living part of the local ecosystem. And they were just simply killing it, see. And really a self-defeating thing, because when they created this huge wide opening and this huge ditch, during periods of dry weather, the ditch would fill up with vegetation, so they have to keep on going back in there and putting more sediment in the whole system. So we went round and round and round with the Soil Conservation Service on this for several years, and then finally we came to a showdown, what I like to refer to as the Battle of Chicago, the Chicago Creek in Pitt County. There we got the Environmental Defense Fund involved, and Fred Barkalow from the university and myself, and brought suit against the the Environmental Defense folk brought suit against the Soil Conservation Service because of the damage being done here. And it was tried before a federal judge, Bob, you might remember the guy.
Larkins.
John Parker?
Larkins.
Larkins, John Larkins, yeah, okay. And Judge Larkins, he realized that if he decided in favor of the farmers, he'd be mud in the eyes of all the sportsmen. If he decided in favor of the sportsmen, he'd be mud in the eyes of all the farmers. So he said to both parties, now look, you go and you decide this, you settle this thing out of court, see. And so what we wound up with was a new concept. Instead of stream channelization, we wound up with a concept of stream restoration, in which we would allow only the clearing of the channel, not changing the direction, just clearing all the sediment in the channel. See? And here I ran into some flack with my own people because they didn't want to have anything done at all. My own people would not recognize the fact that streams do aggregate, they do fill up with sediment. And particularly in recent years because of all the agricultural activity going on. But you could very clearly demonstrate the fact that they do fill up with sediment. And so by changing this to allowing just simply removing of even trees and roots and so forth and sediment and whatever else is in the stream channel, dumping it not in a continuous berm, but in piles, because something else that they were doing in the channelization program was running a berm along both sides of the stream, which then again prevented free flow of water. So with that new concept then of stream channelization, that was the outcome of the Battle of Chicago, and since then it's been pretty much adopted all over the country as far as I know. They've done much larger bodies of water too. So think that was one of the big things that we accomplished over there.
Major accomplishment.
A major accomplishment, I
Yeah.
think. And that, plus the idea of getting the concept of mitigation accepted generally by the public, see? Because until that time, they just more or less ignored wildlife and just shot over. So, I think those are pretty good things that we got done. Also, in that same job though, I had the responsibility for setting up the endangered species program.
That's right.
And so, I contacted some of the most knowledgeable people at the universities about these various species that were on the list, not federal list, and we set up our own state list. And one of the first recovery jobs was the peregrine falcon. We set up a hacking project on the coast, but there because of concern on the part of some of the ornithologists that if we restored peregrines on the coast, that they would be having a devastating impact on some of the shorebirds, so we moved it to the western part of the state. And I think, well, the hacking program is, I don't know whether it's still going on or not, but anyway, it was moved to the western part of the state. We had a little problem there for a while in that the biologists in the Department of Agriculture at the State Museum felt that they knew more about wildlife than anybody else. They had a monopoly on all wildlife information, that they should have had the endangered species program, but
A little turf war. Yeah.
little turf war. So, but anyway, we got through that all right. And what else about endangered species? Oh, the loggerhead turtle.
Red cockaded woodpecker.
The red cockaded woodpeckers, you know, we, actually, the red cockaded woodpeckers had quite a bit of effect on the Sand Hills game land, because there we had to completely modify the timber harvest program to accommodate the red cockaded woodpecker. And we found a few colonies in other places too, but I think there were more problems with private landowners than with us, because the attitude very soon degenerated into one that, hey, look, if you've got a red cockaded woodpecker tree on your place, you better get rid of it fast, before somebody finds it. See? So that is kind of a low point, I suppose. But that was an interesting thing too. And then something else that we did in the late 70s, I think it was, Duke University, Dean Ben Jane at the College of Forestry wanted to have an overview course for his foresters, there's graduate school of forestry, wildlife management. And so Bob Hazel and I got together and we developed a course and taught it there for about 5 years, until Ben developed some heart problems and he left as dean, and they decided to change the course or change the curriculum or something, and they dropped the course at that time. So that was a really interesting thing too. Now, what else can we talk about, Bob?
Tell us a little what you've been doing since you put in the 30-some years with the commission.
Oh, yeah, 32 years with the Wildlife Commission. I retired in 81, July of 81. At that time, the commission was going through some financial problems. Vernon Bevel was director, and they decided that they had to have a reduction in force, and that each department, each division had to give up so many positions. And so Vernon came to me and said, we have to give up one position in your section. And since I could have fired anybody I wanted to and, stayed on, but I said, since I'm the oldest one, I'll just simply retire. I was 62 at the time. And so I retired in 81. And, but soon after that then, I had a call from somebody who said that they were setting up a chapter of Quail Unlimited in North Carolina, and would I like to join? So I said, sure, yeah, I'd like to. So I did, and 1985, or maybe 80, between 83 and 85, somewhere back in those times. And since most of the members of the chapter were city folks from around Raleigh, and they didn't have any place to hunt, thought, well, heck, we can remedy that. I know all about small game. All we have to do is lease some land, plant some food patches, fix up the habitat, we'll have lots of quail to hunt. Good place to hunt. So we did that. We leased several tracts of land, improved the habitat, and lo and behold, the population, instead of going up, went down. And so the question is, what in the world's going on here? And one place over here particularly, I call it my 7 Covey area, near Garner, about 250-acre area that I had hunted before we leased it for Quail Unlimited, had 7 coveys of birds on it. I go there any time to find some birds and do some hunting. And we put in shrubless mediza all around the periphery, all those fields in there, the tobacco fields and small grain and so forth, and real good nesting cover, lots of food in there, and the population dropped down to 3 coveys, 2 coveys, and with all that improvement. And then on some of the other areas that I hunted, with Bill Herring, who's a tremendous, fine gentleman down in Kinston, North Carolina. He runs a warehouse, tobacco warehouse, and one of the finest persons I know. But he's a great quail hunter. And I had extracted a hunt per year with him by virtue of the fact that back when Jim Conley was a commissioner, this was probably sometime in the 60s, I guess. Quail hunting was great, and Ellis Simon, who was one of the leading sportsmen in the eastern part of the state, good friend of Clyde Patton's, was complaining that the bag limit was too low. Now people down there are exceeding the bag limit every day, and that we need to expand the bag limit to 12 birds. So came to me with it and said, well, gee, what is the statewide average? There's only 2 birds per 100 per day, see, so what, it just doesn't make any sense. So they invited me down there in the hunt. Went with Bill Herring and Ellis Simon and 1 or 2 other guys, and boy, the birds were just everything. Birds and birds, coveys, you know, and everybody filled their bags, see. Even I, well, they filled the bag for me because I'm not that good a shot. And so, well, okay, we got to do something. So that's how come the bag limit got expanded from up to 12 birds per day. And as I say, as a result of that, I extracted 1 hunt a year out of Bill Herring to go hunt with Bill Herring down in Kinston. So they've been doing that ever since, except for the last couple of years. But even with Bill Herring, about 5 years ago, the bird population kept dwindling and dwindling and dwindling on places that appeared to be excellent habitat. See? And they're telling me about, well, they go out a night, a field, and blow a rabbit whistle, squealing rabbit, and then shine a light around the edge of the field. They see fox eyes all around the edge of that field. And then something else happened. Terry Sharp sent me a copy of the 1996 National Breeding Bird Survey, which listed the annual percent of increase and decrease in breeding birds in the country. And quail showed an average annual decrease since 1966, when the survey was started, of 2.5% per year. Cooper's hawks showed an average annual increase of 5.5% per year. The only species that was increasing more rapidly than the Cooper's hawk was the bald eagle, which was, I think, 9% per year. And I I started to put two and two together here, and some people accuse me of coming up with an answer of 16, but I think it was a solid 4, see. And I came to the conclusion that the problem is not so much habitat deterioration, habitat loss, as predation, excessive predation. But any biologist, they talk about, oh no, habitat. All you have to do is improve the habitat, you get lots of quail. And Quail Unlimited magazine, Quail Unlimited National Organization, just improve habitat, you have lots of quail. But I made this other observation then, that Quail Unlimited magazine is full of stories, just about every issue, about how much habitat improvement this club did or that club did, how many miles of habitat they did, how many acres of plants, so thousands of acres, millions of pounds of seeds, but no stories about how come we started out with 2 coveys of birds by doing so-and-so and so-and-so. 3 years later we had 6 coveys of birds, 8 coveys. No stories like that, see? Why? Now, if I were running that Quail Unlimited magazine or the Quail Unlimited organization, and I had success stories, I'd push them to the rooftop, you know. Hey, look, all you have to do, and there's the proof, you see. But no proof, no demonstration that habitat was improving. Habitat improvement was increasing the quail population. So I joined the Southeastern Quail Study Group, and I didn't know about the organizing the first year, which was about 1995, I think. But when I found out about the next year, I joined and went to the first meeting I went to was in Tallahassee, and we talked about habitat work then as a culmination of the session. They had 3 reports about how habitat improvement had improved the quail population on these 3 large areas. And on one of them, they had fenced the entire area and trapped out all the predators as part of the habitat improvement program, and they had a big increase in quail. On each of the other 2 areas, they also had a very strong element of predator removal, see? And they had an increase in the quail population. But this was supposed to prove that habitat improvement would increase the quail population, but they completely ignored the predator situation. See, that had part to play with it too. Well, this really bugged me. So, thought, well, what can I do about this? So, I knew quite a few people, and I wrote a bunch of letters, and also I wrote a little pamphlet, predation, anecdotes and speculation about its impact on quail.
You got a copy.
Okay. And I sent that to several hundred people, along with a letter, saying that, hey, look, if you agree with what I'm saying here, why don't you make a pledge of a certain amount of money to donate to the Wildlife Commission to ask them to initiate a study on predation as it relates to the quail situation. And I got $10,000 in a few months' time, see. Don't write the check to me. No, after I got that, see, I've got the pledges. Then I wrote another letter. Okay, time is now. Send me your money. So I got $10,000, see. And we gave it to the Wildlife Commission. And as a result of that, they set this 16-farm study designed by Bill Palmer and Pete Bromley at the university. And on 4 of these farms, the average farm is about 500 acres in size. 4 of these farms, they were to have both habitat improvement and predator reduction by trapping. On 4 of them, just habitat improvement. On another 4, just predator removal, and another 4, check area, nothing done, see. They're going to be monitoring the quail population on these areas. And that's been about finished now. But anyway, the result of that study was that they could not find much improvement as a result of trapping alone. In fact, I think no improvement as a result of trapping alone. They had improvement as a result of habitat improvement, but the most improvement in the quail population came as a result of both habitat improvement and predator removal. But I had some problems with the study. One of the commercial trappers, professional trapper in Hyde County, told me that, hey, look, the traps that these guys are using aren't big enough to hold the predators. Some of the coons and foxes and so forth are getting out of these traps. They're not big enough to hold what they're supposed to hold. But the study was limited. There's an animal rights entity within the university system that says, hey, look, if you're going to be trapping, you can't use a trap larger than a certain size. And so they're limited by that. But the people who really knew about trapping says it's not going to work because it's not big enough. And so I think one of the things that they were doing was developing a cadre of predators that knew how to stay away from the traps, and so they didn't catch them, didn't reduce them, and I think that's part of the flaw of the study. Something else that happened about that same time on one of the plantations, the Fushali plantation in northern Florida, they set up a trapping program using live traps because they're not allowed to use leg traps in Florida. And they baited the live traps with sugar wafers, and they caught raccoons and opossums. And by removing 35 or 40 raccoons and opossums, they got a 250% increase in the quail population. Also, on one of those trips down there, they were taking us on a tour of one of the plantations, like they do the hunters, you know, on these wagons pulled by tractors and so forth, with a whole bunch of guys sitting on these wagons. And the scuttlebutt among the biologists on the wagon that I was riding on was to the effect that on these plantations, on these big quail plantations where they have all these quail, they have a strict policy about predator removal. The only predators that they remove on these plantations are those that crawl or walk or fly, and absolutely no others. Those are the only ones that they remove, see. And so the next day I had an opportunity to talk with one of the top administrators down there, and I said to him, I won't mention his name, I said to him, I get the impression that on some of these plantations they might be pretty rough on the hawks and the owls too. And I thought that he was going to say, oh, no, see, well, maybe on one too. But he didn't say either. What he said was, Frank, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that, see. So, this, of course, kept confirming my decision, opinion, conclusion, that predation is a very important part of the whole quail situation. Unless you do something about it, why, you're not going to really attain any kind of a saturation population of wildlife quail. Then something else happened this past spring. John, you may know more about this than I do, but anyway, I understand that on two of the plantations they brought cases against the plantations for using agricultural chemicals inconsistent with the label. And what I was told when one of these meetings was in Mississippi was that in Mississippi they use Temic. Temic is a great thing to use to get rid of critters that you don't want. Bang, kill them like that, see. So, more and more evidence that, you know, predation and predator control is a very important part of the quail restoration picture, see. So, what this amounts to, then, is that you really cannot restore quail on a landscape scale basis, because there's no way that you're going to control predators on a landscape scale basis. But on individual discrete tracts of land, a chance of being able to do that. But before you can do that, you've got to change the laws and the regulations, because it's unlawful, really, when you get right down to it. At the present time, it's unlawful to restore quail in the southeastern United States. Now, that's a harsh statement to say, but that's the actual fact of the matter. It's unlawful at the present time to restore quail in the southeastern United States on a broad-scale basis. See?